Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story sent in by my friend and subscriber, Mr. Kirk Reed. And wow, guys, Kirk has an amazing amount of experience hunting cryptid creatures and investigating sightings and encounters, working first hand with a lot of encounters and helping them get through the hardest stage of their recovery. I think you guys are going to enjoy this. This is the first story in many to come from Kirk, hopefully. A Sasquatch encounter or sighting, and I think you guys are going to enjoy this. Please do, of course, let me know down below in the comments. Of course, please do like and share. Without further ado, let's get into tonight's story. I'd like to entitle, You Stay Out of the West End, You Hunt Elsewhere. Let's get straight into that. Hi DMT. I'll start with the one that got me searching for answers. After graduating high school and marrying my sweetheart, I started working full time. My father-in-law was very much into deer hunting, as was his son. Those two had been planning a hunting trip to West Virginia for about 6 months. They asked me to come with them. I had always liked rabbit and squirrel hunting, so I decided to ask my boss if I could have the second week off in October to go bow hunting. He said as long as I brought him a couple of deer steaks. Great. I spent the next week getting everything gathered up and ready. Dan, the father-in-law, had a pickup truck with a side-in camper. We loaded all the gear into it and left on the Sunday morning. It was around a 7-hour drive, so we left at 5 AM and we got there about 1 PM. It was an orchard just outside of a town in West Virginia. The owner of the orchard had 1,000 acres of fruit trees and about another 3,000 that was unplanted. Just dense woods and very rough terrain. We decided to eat a quick lunch and then we would go scouting. After lunch, Dan, the father-in-law, said he would go to the south. He told Bill, his son, to go to the east and me to go west. Well, with a knife on my side and bow and arrows in hand, I started walking, looking for a good place to set up a tree stand. As I left the apple grove to go into the woods, I picked out a reference point. It was 2 twin oak trees standing about 30 feet apart. When I say twin, I mean each one split at the base and grew up that way. They were the biggest trees around. Good reference point. They were at the top of a little valley and a creek running through it. The other side of it was the start of very dense woods. I walked down and across the valley, and as I kept noticing, I kept noticing a very strong smell. I just assumed at the time it was from rotting apples outside of the press house where they made cider. I walked on searching for a good spot for a couple of hours. The area was perfect for deer and any other animals, but I oddly did not see any signs of anything being there. We had seen plenty of deer tracks and signs of deer in the orchard, but we're not allowed to hunt in there because apples were still being picked. Where were the deer? Hell, I didn't even see a squirrel or signs of them. Extremely odd. It was a little after 4 o'clock, so I decided to head back to the camper. On the way back, I did start to notice things that I had brushed off, such as broken branches that were too high and big for deer to have done it. I just assumed it was maybe wind damage. After an hour or so of walking, I finally come to the top of the hill with the little valley. I'm looking across the valley to make sure that I'm at the right spot. As I look over, yes, there are the twin oak trees, but there's something very large beside the one on the left. A boulder. I didn't see this before. As I stand there, wondering, the boulder suddenly stands up. I am shocked and frozen still. Its back is to me. My mind is racing. What the hell is this massive thing? It's just standing there. It's huge. Then it turns to the left and walks down over the hill away from me. Thank God. I know the only way back to the camper is to go right where that thing had just been. I was afraid, but no, I have no choice. I waited around 15 minutes to make sure it was long gone. And then I think, if I wait too long, I might run into it on its return. I hurry across the ravine and between the two oaks and back to the camper. I'm visibly shaken at what I just saw, and I could not wrap my head around it, but what the hell was it? I know if I tell my father-in-law that I saw a monster, he will laugh at me. I look for a rational explanation for what I'd seen. I try to convince myself that it must have just been a bear. I tell him that instead of a monster, it was a bear, and he just laughs at me. He says there's no bear in this area. His son wants to know more though. We sit around the fire having dinner and talking. Then we go to sleep, but the whole time I have an uneasy feeling. The next morning we run down to a small gas station convenience store for smokes and breakfast and coffee. Whilst there, two locals are sitting in there having coffee. They ask us if we've had any luck. Dan tells them no, and I add in that I saw a bear. Immediately they both turned white as a sheet and said, "Boy, there aren't any bear in these parts. You stay out of the West End and hunt elsewhere." Thing is, DMT, I'd never told them that I was in the West End of the orchard. We went back and the sun was rising now. The talk between the three of us was that we need to scout more, so we will not hunt this morning. As we were deciding where to look, I get an uneasy feeling, like something is watching us. I ask Dan and Bill if they feel it, and they just simply laugh it off. When we go out to scout more, Bill wants to come with me. We get out of sight of Dan, and Bill says to me, "Show me where you saw this thing." Well, reluctantly, I take him to where it was. We're looking at the tree, and Bill asks how big it was. I pointed to a limb that was nearly where its head was. Bill says it has to be 8 feet tall. I tried to reach it by holding my bow by the end and using it as an extension of my own arm. I can just barely touch it. About now, I really start to get an uneasy feeling. I tell him it's time to leave. We went back to the camper and then to the east scouting. We found a place at about 4:30 that afternoon, and we were all out in our tree stands, and Dan starts hollering. We could barely hear him, so we ran straight over to where he was. He was saying that he had shot a deer, and all three of us start following the blood trail. Soon we came to an area that looks like the deer laid down and bled out, but there is no deer. There's no sign of it at all. Matted down grass and then the wood line. The deer is just gone. We look till it's getting too dark to see, and then we return to the camper and make dinner. As we're eating, we were talking. Dan is completely puzzled by the deer being gone. Too much blood on the ground for it to have just been alive and walked off. Bill is wondering about what I saw and what happened to the deer. I am just still in disbelief of it all. I brought up that maybe the bear took the deer, but Dan looks at me and just says, something or someone did. We all have an uneasy feeling that night. Instead of sitting around the campfire, we are all in the camper, and we decide to turn in early. Around 3 AM, we are awakened by the camper shaking. After a minute or so, it stops. Dan, with a very puzzled look on his face, says, "It must have been the wind. Go back to sleep." Thing was, DMT, we were all unarmed except for bows and arrows. I lay there trying to sleep. About 30 minutes pass, and it happens again. Bill gets up and looks out, sees absolutely nothing. Says the weather is changing, must be a storm. Must be the storm that's coming or something like that, so we're going to leave early in the morning. We left around 5 AM and started heading home. The trip was cut short by 3 days. I found out afterwards the weather was absolutely beautiful for the next week. No storm, I still don't know what took the deer or shook the camper, but I do know that what I saw was not a bear. It was built like an NFL linebacker, only twice as big. The three of us never spoke of that trip ever again. P.S. After getting home, I took my bow and tried to reach up with it outstretched to see how high I could reach. The tip of it was 10.5 feet from the ground. That is how tall that thing was. This, DMT, is what started my hunt for answers. In my journeys, I have ran across Dogman also. DMT, this is all true 100%. And I hope that you have a wonderful Christmas and an even better New Year. Regards, Kirk. Wow, thank you so much, buddy. As I said before, absolutely love speaking to you every time. Always something new to speak about and learn, such an abundance of knowledge. Really do appreciate your support with sharing these stories with me, and I'm sure the listeners do as well. Do let us know down below what you thought, guys, in the comments. Wonderful Bigfoot or Sasquatch story there. Of course, please do like and share. And remember, if you're going out bow hunting this weekend, keep your eyes in the trees and to your left and your right. And above all, be safe, not sorry.